Greetings, known world. I'm Elsie, and I'm going to speak with you this morning about a couple of different topics related to doing displays. My camera is being a little creative, so we may have some technical difficulties, but let's go ahead and get started on talking about creating static displays for non-static SCA arts. And there we go. Go to the screen share. We'll go to this one. Do that, set me up for a slideshow. Cool, and we should be good to go. So most of our display opportunities, well, at least within the West Kingdom, most of what we do when we do artist displays is we have stuff that's really kind of optimized for static arts and material arts, stuff that we've got that's going to fit on a 6-foot long table and going to be in place, and generally is going to be a material thing that people can touch and pick up, interact with. Some of us have arts that don't necessarily translate to that well. Maybe we have very messy arts with finished products that don't belong indoors, or we have animals involved, or we have arts that are as much performance. They're less tactile, or maybe they're conceptual, and they're stuff that doesn't fit that format well. But there are ways you can still come out and have a good time and interact with others. And I'm going to focus in on a lot of those in this particular lecture. So coming into this may take a little bit of a mental shift. Being able to go through and focus in and take your creativity and sort of think about what is the context in which your art would have been experienced as a medieval person. And what are the knowledge gaps that modern people have about it? Those are the two pieces that I bring to the table when I'm sitting down and I'm trying to decide how I want to put together a display for horsemanship. So this is not an opportunity to show yourself at your best. It's really not. This format's probably, we've already established, this format's not optimized for what you're doing. It is not going to be able to show your best and highest pinnacles of achievement. It really comes more to thinking about the audience and what it is that they will get out of the display and how to interact with them in a way that's going to capture their attention and maybe add to their knowledge. And in doing those things, you can share your art with others and you can share your skills. Just recognize it's not going to be optimized for you, and that's okay. And if it's not okay, this may not be the venue for you, but it could be. So I'm going to take you guys through initially one of the early displays that I did that was an in-person display. There was a lot of stuff. There's a lot more stuff involved in this than would possibly fit on a 6-foot long table. So one of the first things that I did, and I do this regularly when I do these sorts of displays, is I reached out to the organizer and I said, hey, can I have extra space? Can I have space that involves putting things on the floor, not just on a table? 90% of the time, that works great. Most of these displays are set up in the format that they are because they work for the majority of people and because it's what we've used and what they've seen. The organizers are not trying to exclude people. They just don't know what you need until you reach out to them and ask. And if they can accommodate you, almost everyone has been fantastic. Every once in a while they can't, and that's okay. They have other constraints that they're working within. Not a problem. But by reaching out to them in advance, finding out if I can be accommodated, and if I can't, then I go and I support the other artists instead. So, when we look at the amount of stuff that we had for this, so this is the my pile of stuff in my living room, but this is the back of my full-sized F-250, which was crammed to the gills with stuff for my display, including bringing my own racks for the saddles to put on that rested on the floor. Those were in the back of the truck. So this was a tremendous amount of stuff. I am very jealous with people who have cute, tidy displays. Mine are never cute and tidy, although I do have a couple tricks I'll share later on how to make them a little bit tidier, smaller, more compact. So because I couldn't bring the horses to this one, I was trying to think of ways that I could share that with others. Photos and video are the two most successful techniques. And in a lot of ways, displaying my arts are almost easier in a virtual setting because we're better set up for photos and video in a virtual setting. But what I was able to do with this one is I did take all the photos and the videos as I went along. And specifically, this was talking about how to fit saddle trees. And this is the example of a wither tracing, which is something we do modernly to fit saddle trees. And so I went through and I made basically virtual versions of my 3 horses. This is Mallory, this is Nick, my mule, and this is Moose. And I brought their virtual shapes. And so that was something where I could ask people as they were coming through and interacting, I would give them these tools to play with. I had the saddles from the same 3 horses and they could interact. So here we had on the table, I had these 3 things spread out. I prepared kind of 3 different little mini lessons for folks as they came up. I had a few eye-catching things, which would bring them into the table. And I had mini lessons prepared. I had one on saddle fitting, which you've seen sort of the beginnings of. These are the wires that I bent over the horses, but we make tracings because they lose their shape. So I wanted to make something that could be handled without losing its shape, and so that people could interact with it consistently through the day. I brought examples of a few other bits and pieces of equipment. And then I did actually have a question that they could answer. And I said, if they wanted, I would talk with them about what kind of a horse their persona would have interacted with. So that would be something that I interacted with them on a very specific level. I did find that the wither tracings were the thing most people were drawn to. I think it's a bit like children's museums, right? You get to go and play with the exhibits. We tend to be people of doing and use. So this was something where it was easy for them to interact and do and handle things and walk away with a little bit of knowledge and understanding of what we did. So we also, for handling the equipment, I had a couple of simple things. What I like about this photo, so here's a couple of different types of bits, right? So these are both modern bits. They're not even specifically reproductions of period bits, but they undergo the same physics that the period bits do. When you go look at the extant period bits that are in museums, I can tell you when one is in a horse's mouth if it has a solid mouthpiece or a jointed mouthpiece, because solid mouthpieces, the shanks hang straight. Jointed mouthpieces, like this jointed Liverpool, the shanks hang at funny angles. By interacting with these pieces of equipment over the years, you pick up knowledge where you can look and see how the extant stuff works and look and see how it's looking in art, and helps aid to your interpretation of that. Modern people don't have that experience working with even the modern equipment. So by bringing that through and adding that little bit of factor in, I can help give them knowledge on how they can better interact and interpret stuff, because horses are everywhere in medieval art and everywhere in many, not all, medieval museums. Talked about the saddle fitting was one of the more popular things. So along those lines, I actually brought the 3 saddles that went with my 3 equids. So this is Mallory's saddle. That was the narrow withers. This is Nick's saddle, and this was the medium size, and this is actually Moose's saddle. So these 2 have been custom fit to them by professionals. This is one that I found that was the best fit, and we make some adjustments with pads to make it work for him. But so people could then take the wither tracings and they could match them up and figure out which saddle went with which equid. I also brought, for ambiance, their saddle pads. I did technically make these, which means I cut them out of felted wool that was already felted. This is one of my sets of barding that I bought. Made things look a little more medieval. I had their bridles with them, which were really mostly there for ambiance as much as anything. Silly stuff like throwing a tablecloth down around. This is that saddle rack you saw pictured in the back of my truck holding these up. Throwing a tablecloth down in the bottom. That's not. I've never seen an example of a tablecloth in the bottom of the saddle rack at a period stable. However, we're used to throwing fabric over mundane things. That kind of brings things back into our culture. The saddle rack is naturally built to display things at separate heights. So you add that element of height to the display that draws people in and helps stuff look a little bit better. And it's something that actually, even if you've got a standard art, being able to display your art at different levels on your flat table will make your art look a little bit better for folks. I did actually use the bridles a couple times to show people the weight and let them interact with these sorts of things. This is just an example of a few more things that I had on that table, and the lessons that I was teaching as I was going through, and also, me doing what I do mostly at Artisans Displays, which is pontificate. I also had a couple things here in the background of this image. One, I've got my my bags that I brought stuff in. I haven't always found a good solution. I got better at this as I've done more. When you bring a lot of equipment that's well wrapped, you have a lot of wrapping. Sometimes the wrapping is going to fit better the table. So now I try to think a little bit more about, as I'm bringing things, not only do I need to bring the things I need to describe stuff, but I need to make sure that I tidy up the area around and make stuff look a little bit tidier and not have distracting things in the background. I do always bring, because I try to keep copies of a lot of my work online. Some of it's on my website, different places and stuff like that, but I do actually tend to bring a tablet with me, or something that I can access the internet on a good size, so that if there is a question that comes up, if there is something I want to describe, if there is something I didn't think to bring with me, I can at least access that material, show folks the photos, even if those are not the photos that I printed and I picked off. I can always refer back. I'm not without my resources. So this is a little bit of the display as a whole. This was a great one. It was a big square. It was on a corner, so I was still part of the circulation. But I was able to spread out and have my display on a couple of levels and move around and pull people in. A couple times when I'm getting accommodated, because space is one of those things I need, I wind up on an end. Not everybody makes it to the end of big, long displays. The circles were good for bringing people in, and having people steadily coming by makes it a lot easier as an artist to find folks to interact with when you have a weird art. Because, you know, if only 5% of the people are going to stop by and see what you do, it helps to have a bigger number to actually keep things going. So the location really makes a difference. So moving on from a lot of the physical equipment, I've done a couple of other different display types that have worked with varying amounts. I've been very happy about the information I've been able to convey. Actually, physically having the material items there is a little more engaging for your viewers. The audience will come in, they'll interact with the physical items in a way that they don't always interact with the posters, so you have to sell a little bit harder. That's a gray area. So this was one I actually put together for Wreath of Athena display. And it was a review of the training that I had done with my horse over about 6 years time period at that point. These were photos that were taken when I was doing mundane riding. But I've got quotes from period masters. I've got full-on descriptions, and this whole poster is very, very large. What I did find with it is that if I show this poster to folks who ride, they engage with the photos and they immediately get it, and they'll go back and they'll look at the details. If I show it to non-riders, they're much more likely to have kind of a lost thing. It's a little bit busy without the one-on-one interaction. So I found, for me at least, Wreath of Athena is not a great venue for me to display, because what I like about displaying and getting the work out there in a suboptimal environment is I like the one-on-one interactions with folks. And so I don't get that with Wreath of Athena. So I like this. It was really good. I still use it in a lot of venues, but I didn't find it worked as well as a standalone item as I might have otherwise liked. Smaller is better. Known things is better. Simple stuff is better. I have displayed like bridles and stuff like that in Wreath of Athena, and those did much, much better because they were tangible items, and people inherently understood what they were without having to give all the explanations. So that being said, I can't always bring the entire truck to 12th night. Taking a lot of those information around, if I want to wear big pretty dresses, or a lot of those equipment around, if I want to wear a big pretty dress, is not always optimal. So I did take that poster concept, and what a lot of this is based on is kind of, and in science we have scientific poster sessions where people put information out and they sit and they explain, but it all folds down nicely. Well, as it happens, Spoonflower will actually let you print on these items. They're nice, they're usable, it's not terribly expensive. There's descriptions on their particular website on how to build it. So this was the first time I was doing an artisan's display where I specifically created the work to be a display. You know, it wasn't stuff that I just had around the house. It wasn't stuff where I just pulled a few pieces together. I said, okay, I'm going to sit down and do a research project and make an artisan's display out of it. So I looked up horse terms in the OED. and I found different ways to present it. So this was one on anatomy, this was one detailing the colors of the horse, this was one about driving terms, and this was a listing of period things they did with horses, coupled with photos of me riding in garb. One of the comments I got in the prior one is, yeah, there's some great photos and I can see what you're doing, but I'd like to see you in garb. So photos of me riding in garb. These are very, very large displays. I did bring the infrastructure to put them on, and I've displayed these a few times in a few different places. They don't do terribly well in the wind outdoors, but I've had really, these have been very successful for me as long as I can get somebody started in a conversation. That initial, they do not bring people in as easily as the actual physical equipment seems to. Also, they've been slightly, some of that may have been location within the display or who the audience was, but I can't control those things. What I can control is what my things I bring to the table. So I like these, and I think what I would do in the future if I were to sit down and do a similar project is I would develop posters, and I would also have equipment there. Because use the equipment and the pretty and the shiny to pull people in, and then I can go ahead and use the posters to show the knowledge and show some of the items that are there, and maybe get them excited. I will say, of course, people still inherently excited about all of these things. It comes together well. And I will also say, because these are small and packable, I still have them. They've been able to go multiple places. I could fly with them. They'll do a lot of really, really easy and amazing things, and I can still use them for other items. So they were well worth creating. When I am doing an in-person display, I talked a little bit about reaching resources and stuff like that. One of the things I have learned to do is always have a business card. I'm not even good about mundanely, I'll just text you my contact information. But in an SCA setting, I've gone through and printed off business cards. This is the back of one of my business cards. What I actually have on the front is this anatomy image with the different words. And so it becomes a little handout I can give. And I probably, as I develop other displays, I may change that front picture to match my display so that people can associate those things in together. But I have just really basic information in on here. And then I also have the QR code that goes to where I keep the folder I keep all of my resources linked into. I have a separate business card that covers my horsemanship related web research that I will hand this out sometimes depending on what class I'm giving, or I'll have at least a few copies of them because sometimes that's the more appropriate resource. I find that QR codes are really helpful. It lets people are not going to, if you have a really, really long address, like this website has a really, really long address, nobody's going to type that in. My website very specifically has a very simple domain. And so the QR codes may be a little less useful there because some folks can manage to type in equicedu.com. But other people would like to just scan the card, and some people will pick up the card, scan it, click it on their thing, and hand the card back to you. They don't even take it away with them. So a couple other things to think about. Depending on where you are in your journey and showing off your art, a lot of what I'm doing at this point is very knowledge-based. I've written for 45 years now. And so a lot of times when I'm doing these things, it's about, I'm stressing how things were done in period, which means backing that up with sources and references. I don't necessarily keep all that in my head. I keep some of it, I can speak generically about things in my head, but I can go through and I will have a single page printed reference list for a lot of stuff that I did. This happens to be the reference list from that period English terms posters I was just showing you. I also went through and I have the acknowledgements for my photographers, and this is just a single sheet of paper I can put on my table if people are looking through it. They can also go ahead and pick up my online resources where there's more detailed stuff there. But consider doing that. If you've got books that have inspired you, if you've got something that's like your go-to book and you're like, this is amazing, bring it with you. Share that, because not only does it help back up what you've learned, sometimes at artisans displays, you find the geek who has the same geek that you like to geek about, and being able to share that resource that you find amazing is so much fun, because those personal interactions, for me at least, are the best part of this. Being able to either share your art and make people think about it in a new way, or find that person who already inherently understands what gets you so excited and connecting with them. It really makes a big difference and makes these things much, much, much more fun. So I want to go ahead and recap a few final lessons to remind myself to say these things as we go. I really think that this is something worth trying. If you like interacting with others at all, even if your art does not seem like it's a great fit for the standard, put things on a flat 6-foot table and sit there for 6 hours. Now, it's different than that. And like I said, reach out. A lot of times people are willing to accommodate you. You have to go through and think about things a little bit differently. For me, I go prepared with 2 to 3 lessons, 2 to 4 lessons that I want to teach, so that as people come up, I can go ahead and interact with them and start a conversation and bring them in to my geeky, excited, horse addicted little world. But it's actually been a lot of fun and a good way to interact with others. It is really good practice for being able to interact with others about your art. For me, I don't want people's eyes to completely glaze over when I talk with them about horses. And so it's a good chance for me to kind of interact with them, watch for where that level is, develop my techniques and my ability to interact one-on-one with others, where I'm educating them and I'm also not boring them to tears, because it is really easy for them to move on to the next thing. So that's a good trial by fire for me. Having something that's tangible, having something that's visible really does seem to work best. Something that's interactive works tremendously well. One of the biggest keys, this is a big one, have a ground crew. Have someone to help you set up, have somebody who's going to keep you fed and watered, have some folks that even if they're not there with you the whole time, will pop through occasionally. Even just having someone having a conversation with you when things are kind of at a lull. If you are conversing with someone, sometimes other people will feel safe coming up. If you're sitting at a table and there's no one there and you're looking kind of maybe sad or bored or angry, you're not going to be able to draw people in as easily. Having someone to have a conversation with, even and you need to be aware of people coming in so that you can draw them into your circle more. But having kind of that it's an old sideshow technique, I think. I certainly learned it from working at parish carnivals. But it makes a big difference, and it makes it more successful and makes the outreach a little bit easier. There are definitely skills that I used in preparing for this that came for grad school oral exams. I'm very comfortable on off-the-cuff questioning. I'm very comfortable on speaking in short mini lessons, on pulling out portions of my knowledge and engaging with folks with that. Find the skills that you have. Find what you're comfortable with in regards to interacting with others and build on those skills. Set yourself up for success. Build upon your strengths. Set yourself up for your strengths to be good. For me, working the day of was, again, showmanship is kind of that ability to perform. I've spent a lot of years showing off animals and making them look their best. So I've got kind of a default role that I fall into on that one. And I found I fell back on those. We also, growing up as a kid, we did displays where we showed off our art and our agriculture in static displays. So some of those things came into play in terms of how to lay the display out and those sorts of factors. Find what works for you. Find what experiences you have. The first one I did, my amazing protege was helping me, and she came with a lot of retail experience, so she knew how to lay things out. And really, the layout was largely dependent on the work that Kathy put together on that. So find those pieces that you have in your knowledge base. Find that stuff that you can cross over, and it will make you feel more comfortable in what you have to do. If you do not have stuff that you think you can lay back on, maybe go walk around some museums. Look and see how the displays are put up, particularly the ones designed to be more interactive, maybe the ones targeted at children, and look and see the structural elements of that. And that might give you some ideas on, oh, hey, I can do this with my art to make it look a little more inviting and educational, and and make it look really really have everything excel out of context, you know. Gee, I'm going to take this item, I'm not using it, I'm taking this really amazing scroll and I'm laying it flat on the table, which is not what it was designed to do. Being able to pull those pieces together makes a big difference. And most importantly, remember to have fun. If you try this once and you're like, oh no, this is not for me, cool, that's fine. There's things in the artist world that are not for me, that don't interact well. But have a good time. If you try it, you're like, oh hey, that was pretty good. If I can tweak this one thing, then try it again. This is here for us to enjoy ourselves and do all those things along those lines that we really like. And I hope you guys have a great time sharing your art. And with that, we can go ahead and turn off the camera and do questions. So thanks, guys.
I actually have a question that I'll go ahead now. That way
Yes.
others can. So a lot of people that are going to be watching these tend to be new or new to the idea of doing this. What about things like a digital display? So like you're riding horses. What about a video or a short video of you riding? Is that acceptable in an SCA setting?
Yeah, so I have done that. Like I said, I bring my tablet and I always include it, and I have copies of videos in there. I have not made that a prominent feature of my display, only because I found that my interactions with folks have been sporadic enough that having it playing all the time in the background, I don't have the best battery on my tablet. And so I haven't set up for that. But no, I think that would be a very, very great way to bring that in. Or even if you wanted to do, you know, maybe you don't want to print out all your photos. You know, maybe what you want to have is like a digital picture frame, scrolling through and doing your photos and that sort of thing. You know, I think that's a great idea, and just bring the appropriate backup batteries and that sort of thing. And I think actually for Mousio, that's Mousio, a little more Disney, keep putting in too much Spanish, that's coming up. I think I'm probably going to do some video for that of a couple of things interacting with the horses, and I'll just have that one prepared to go and bring appropriate batteries for it. So.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
Nope, that's it.
Thank you. That was a great question.